Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
And the Delta variant now accounts for more than 80% of new CCP virus cases in the U.S. That's according to Doctor Anthony Fauci. He testified at a Senate hearing today, and things got heated between him and Republican Senator Rand Paul over NIH funding to the Wuhan lab. Let's listen in.
Dr. Fauci, as you are aware, it is a crime to lie to Congress. Section 1001 of the U.S. Criminal Code creates a felony and a 5-year penalty for lying to Congress. This research matches, these are Dr. Ebright's words, this research matches, indeed epitomizes, the definition of gain-of-function research done entirely in Wuhan, for which there was supposed to be a federal pause. Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Microphone.
Your microphone.
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function.
So
let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about.
How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2, that's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well,
we don't
wait
know
a minute.
If it did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator. Those viruses are molecularly impossible to result in SARS-CoV-2.
Pandemic. We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were animal viruses that became more transmissible in human, and you funded it.
And you
admit the truth.
And you implying...
Senator Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond.
You are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
A record-breaking rainstorm hit central China, causing extensive damage. Unlike the Chinese official media outlet reports, apparent deaths and injuries are revealed through social media. A flood also caused the explosion of a local chemical plant. Some even said it resembled a nuclear explosion. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
Flooding in central China's Henan province led to an explosion in a metal factory. The flames went up early Tuesday morning. Just a warning, some viewers may find the following footage disturbing due to its graphic nature. Authorities said the floodwater in a nearby river overflowed the riverbank and caused the factory's wall to collapse. When the water flooded the high-temperature solution in the alloy tank, it set off the explosion. Some local residents said the explosion shattered windows miles away, and window frames almost fell off. Others said the explosion caused a huge shaking, and they were woken up by it. They felt as though there was an earthquake. Chinese state-run media haven't reported any casualties. NTD cannot independently verify the casualties. This explosion isn't an isolated case. Massive explosions in chemical plants occurred frequently in China, causing heavy casualties. According to Chinese state-run media, between 2016 and 2018, there were more than 600 accidents in chemical companies in the country. In 2019, a chemical plant exploded in a town in eastern China's Jiangsu province. According to Chinese state media, it led to about 80 deaths. And 5 years before that, again in the same province, a serious explosion happened in another chemical plant, causing almost 100 deaths. And then in 2015, just 80 miles east of Beijing, a chemical plant exploded in Tianjin City. Almost 170 people died.
Police protection for me, but not for thee. Big city mayors across the country are spending heavily on private security while defunding the police. A watchdog group reveals exactly how much they're costing taxpayers.
Nonprofit Open the Books, or OTB, finds that 25 big cities across the nation have cut or are proposing to cut police budgets. But in 20 of them, the mayors are also spending heavily on their own security details. And this is happening only in cities with Democratic mayors. OTB looked at publicly available data through Freedom of Information Act requests. Here's what they found. Chicago quietly cut 400 officer positions in 2020, but the money spent on protecting city officials went up from $2.7 million in 2015 to $3.4 million in 2020. The cost is $17.3 million total over the past 6 years. And there's San Diego.
In San Diego, in 2020, the city spent $2.6 million on their executive protection detail, while they stripped approximately $5 million out of the police budget.
San Francisco promised to relocate $120 million from their police budget in 2 years. But Mayor London Breed spent $2.6 million on her security detail in 2020. That figure is over $12 million for the past 6 years combined. Baltimore slashed $22 million from its police budget last year, but spent $3.6 million on protecting 3 people: the mayor, the state's attorney for the city, and the police commissioner. New York City took away $1 billion from the NYPD's $6 billion budget, but Mayor Bill de Blasio is getting his own NYPD security detail. The NYPD did not provide the exact numbers to OTB. Similar things are happening in cities like Portland, Los Angeles, and D.C.
A White House official and a spokesperson for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have tested positive for the CCP virus. Both are fully vaccinated. This comes as a 6th member of the Texas Democratic delegation that fled their state to D.C. tests positive.
First, let me confirm that yesterday a fully vaccinated White House official tested positive for COVID-19 off campus. In accordance with our rigorous COVID-19 protocols, the official remains off campus as they wait for a confirmatory PCR test. The White House Medical Unit has conducted contact tracing interviews and determined no close contacts among White House principals or staff or the president. The individual has
A senior spokesperson in Speaker Pelosi's office on Monday tested positive for COVID. That person is also fully vaccinated. Officials confirmed to Axios these 2 individuals attended the same reception last week. Pelosi's Deputy Chief of Staff Drew Hamill said on Tuesday the aide had no contact with Pelosi since the exposure. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says there will be breakthrough cases. A congressman is calling on the Chinese regime to free a detained relative of a Falun Gong practitioner. That's after Chinese police arrested a man at his home in China.
Chinese geological engineer Zhou Deyong last saw his wife and son in Los Angeles about a year ago. He then flew back to China to care for his ailing parents. Now he's being held in a Chinese detention center with little access to the outside world. Zhou's wife Youling says she was shocked to hear the news.
When I heard that he has been arrested, I was a little bit stunned. How could he have been arrested? The police are supposed to catch bad people. He's such a good man and has never done bad things.
Back in April, police officers raided Zhou's home in China without a search warrant. They arrested him after finding Falun Gong-related books and booklets there.
Then I realized they were targeting Falun Gong because I practice Falun Gong.
Falun Gong is a spiritual meditation practice. Despite being arrested for it, Zhou himself is not a practitioner. The family's plight caught the attention of Republican Congressman Gus Bilirakis. He wrote a letter to Chinese Communist Party or CCP leader Xi Jinping, calling for Zhou's release. He told the Epoch Times that it's really unforgivable some of the things the Chinese Communist Party has done to these wonderful people. 2 decades ago, the CCP launched a campaign against the practice, Millions have been detained, tortured, while some have even been killed in China since then. Yuling herself was also persecuted. In 2012, she had to spend more than a month in a secret, unlawful detention facility known as a black jail that the CCP uses. Every day, she was fed propaganda materials attacking her faith. The family fled to the U.S. in 2019. But recently, Zhou's parents living in China, aged 87 and 90, are starting to suffer from heart diseases and other health issues.
This time, he's not only unable to take care of his parents, but also the parents themselves may get hurt. As of now, we have been hiding the news from his parents, and we dare not tell them.
Yuling says her in-laws don't understand what was wrong with going back to China to take care of them.
This is his home. Why he can't go back to his home?
Now Yuling has to lie to her in-laws, saying that Zhou has returned to the U.S. Authorities in China are tight-lipped about Zhou's detention. Zhou's family only started to feel something went wrong when Zhou left their phone calls unanswered for days.
Then I began to look for him because I did not know where he was and where he was detained. I first called the local police station, but they did not answer my calls.
It took Yuling a long time to find out where her husband was. Chinese authorities initially denied Zhou from meeting with his lawyer. That was before Zhou mentioned Congressman Bilirakis' letter to them.
When the lawyer told him about me and my son, he started to cry. He said he hopes that we can stay well in the U.S.
Chinese authorities accused Zhou of what they called utilizing heretical religion to sabotage the enforcement of law. It's a common charge that many religious believers have faced in China, and they could face 3 to 7 years in jail.
We used to be a very happy family, but now being persecuted and forced to be separated. I'm also very sad.
A decade ago, a group of Congress members, including Bilirakis, sponsored a House resolution. It called for an end to the ongoing persecution against Falun Gong practitioners in China. Bilirakis says now it's time to bring another one to Congress's attention.
Today marks 22 years since the Chinese Communist Party began persecuting people who practice Falun Gong, the spiritual discipline. The U.S. State Department is calling on the Chinese regime to bring an end to their campaign of repression. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
In China, over the last 22 years, the Chinese Communist Party has carried out a brutal persecution of the spiritual group Falun Gong. On Monday, the State Department called for the repression to end.
We recognize 22 years since the People's Republic of China launched a campaign of repression against the Falun Gong movement and its millions of practitioners, advocates, and the human rights defenders working to protect their rights. We call on the PRC to immediately cease its campaign against Falun Gong practitioners and release those imprisoned due to their beliefs.
The CCP's anti-religious campaign involves propaganda, brainwashing, torture, and even murder. The regime uses several methods to force practitioners to renounce their faith. Some of those include forced labor, sleep deprivation, and death resulting from having their organs forcibly removed, sometimes without anesthesia. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told NTD the U.S. needs to stand up for the adherents' religious freedom.
And with respect to the Falun Gong, the absence of religious freedom in China is horrific. It is tragic. It's gone on for too long, and America needs to lead the world to ensure that those people have the opportunity to practice their faith in the way they want to.
Some say the CCP launched its violent campaign to eradicate Falun Gong because the practice's core values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance appear incompatible with communist atheist ideology. Tragically, over 4,600 practitioners are estimated to have been persecuted to death, though this may just be a fraction of the real toll given the number of unreported deaths. The Interparliamentary Alliance on China is speaking out on the anniversary. It's calling on governments across the world to end what the Independent China Tribunal calls a state-sponsored, systematic-level persecution of Falun Gong adherents in China. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
The Epoch Times hosted an in-person event in New York City called Defending the Constitution, Why It Matters Now More Than Ever. The event included constitutional experts and rights defenders who've taken steps to preserve the Constitution. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
The event kicked off with Alan Dershowitz, a Democrat who taught at Harvard for 50 years.
Today, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube say they have the right to censor. They have the right to take the President of the United States and the ex-president off their platforms at the same time that they promote Reverend Farrakhan and the head of Iran and repression in China and all kinds of other repressive measures. And we shouldn't be allowing elitists to determine what we read, what we see, and what we hear.
And Che An, the pastor who battled in court and got churches reopened during the lockdowns. His father was arrested for being a pastor in communist North Korea, so he understands the value of having freedom of speech.
A lot of times, unless we understand what communism is all about, you really can't really understand why some of the people that are taking a stand for freedom and First Amendment rights are doing so.
President of Wall Builders Timothy Barton tried to clear up some misconceptions of America's history of slavery.
Is there are literal people who argue today the Declaration of Independence, when Jefferson said that all men are created equal, he was only talking about the white men. Go back and read his original draft, because he emphasized who he was talking about, who these men were. Jefferson, contrary to what a lot is told today, Jefferson actually advocated against slavery most of his life, that a lot of people have no idea, but even...
He went on to say that 11 of the 13 original colonies opposed slavery, but at that time, the former president of the Continental Congress, John Hancock, wanted the Declaration of Independence to be unanimous among the 13 colonies. And at that time, South Carolina and Georgia had not yet tried to end slavery. Members of the audience were happy they attended the event of such a unique setting.
Everybody found a home here tonight. It's beautiful. People were able to disagree in public and not try to kill and/or cancel each other.
Well, I thought the event was wonderful. And to be in New York and to be around so many people that are conservative or that are, believe in the Constitution, that love America, that brings tears to my eyes and just joy to my heart.
Kevin Roberts, who is the CEO of Texas Public Policy Foundation, encouraged everyone to go to the next school board meeting, no matter where your child goes to school. And if you are frustrated with that experience, then run for school board. He says that's what they've been doing in Texas. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What did today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.